Greetings, everyone. Here are the latest analyses of today's important developments. Moscow's steel shield has officially collapsed, sparking shock as a sea of fire engulfs Voronezh. Tens of millions in Russian military equipment have burned in a supposedly secure rear area after the air defense network mysteriously failed. Su-57 has found the death corridor to destroy the Mi-28 and Mi-17 sky monsters right on the enemy's runway. The FV-9 missile beast emerges, marking the beginning of the Kremlin's worst nightmare. Su-57 has secretly unleashed the trump card FV-9, a domestically produced ballistic missile, even more terrifying than the Iskander, revealing Kyiv's plan to systematically neutralize enemy air defenses to pave the way for warheads aimed straight at the heart of Russia. Here is the content and detailed analysis. Putin is restless. The supersonic Su-57 jet, 3 Mi-28 helicopters were destroyed by fire. Ladies and gentlemen, a seismic shock has just rocked the very core of Russia's territory. And at first glance, many people might mistake this for yet another one of the familiar long-range attacks that Kyiv has launched before. But from the perspective of a geopolitical observer, this is a fatal crack, marking a potentially historic turning point in the entire course of the conflict. Ukraine is gaining momentum on the battlefield, shifting the balance of power in their favor. After quietly building their forces, the strategy has become a perfect plan, delivering a devastating blow to the opponent's weak point. Now let's turn our attention to Voronezh, a Russian territory located near Luhansk and right next to Kharkiv. With the front line only about 150 kilometers away, this area was once considered a safe rear base by Russia's military elite. Given the Ukrainian army's current combat capabilities, that distance is now irrelevant. The raid took place on April 29th. What just happened was not just an ordinary attack, but the brutal result of a joint combat operation that had been meticulously prepared for many months, starting from the critical weakness of the Russian helicopter squadron. On a quiet runway at Voronezh, 4 of Russia's airborne killing machines were letting their guard down. They included at least 1 Mi-28 attack helicopter and a Mi-17 transport helicopter, which were parked for refueling and undergoing technical inspections. For those Russian pilots, this was supposed to be just another routine stopover before taking off again to unleash firepower and transport troops into Ukrainian territory. They didn't expect the skies over Voronezh to be torn apart that day, turning the routine refueling station into one of the war's most spectacular strike scenes. A series of Ukrainian first-person view drones silently traveled a long distance to lock onto their targets, the helicopters lying motionless on the ground. At that crucial moment, Russia's air defense appeared paralyzed, or possibly there was a prior vulnerability. Without encountering any resistance, each drone coldly rushed in, launching direct strikes and turning what was supposed to be an absolutely safe zone into a sea of fire. Close-up footage of this spectacular raid quickly spread, and Robert Bob himself, the commander of Ukraine's drone forces, shared it with a sense of defiant pride. The brutality and precision of the strike were truly astonishing. The deadly drills passed through the main rotor system, piercing the engine compartment behind the helicopter's center. The immediate result was the loss of at least 1 Russian technical maintenance specialist at the scene. This loss of personnel exposes a harsh truth about the depletion of expertise in the Russian military, as the lack of resources forces them to sacrifice tens of thousands of lives on the front lines instead of preserving invaluable technical logistics specialists in the rear. The losses of war machines are what caused the Russian military apparatus to bleed the most. Analyses indicate that, in addition to the Mi-28 and Mi-17, a multi-role Mi-8 helicopter has also been reduced to ashes. Let's look at this asymmetric warfare scenario. A Mi-8 worth $6 million was blown up by a Ukrainian drone that cost less than 1/10 of that amount. The disparity becomes even more absurd when the Mi-28 costs up to $18 million to manufacture, and the Mi-17 monster has an export price reaching $32 million. Even if Russia's domestic production costs are only half that, it's still a dark day when tens of millions of dollars and the defense budget are shredded by flying sanctions called Ukraine. Objectively speaking, the Kremlin has probably had to grow bitterly accustomed to these massive losses. According to data from the Ukrainian Ministry of Finance, since President Putin launched the military campaign, Russia has lost up to 30,052 helicopters. Their Iron Birds have continuously had their wings broken in the most unbelievable scenarios, from guerrilla forces destroying a Mi-28N right at the training center in the Tver region in August. To the unprecedented shock when a Mi-28 was shot down by a drone right in midair in September last year. However, the strike at the Voronezh base had a completely different strategic significance and clearly marked a turning point in the war. This was not a fluke or a one-off effort by frontline units. It was a symphony orchestrated by Ukraine's deeply embedded intelligence network. They didn't blindly launch drones into the sky from hundreds of kilometers away, hoping for luck. Ukraine's intelligence and unmanned combat forces knew every heartbeat, every refueling schedule of the enemy squadron. From there, they struck at the exact moment when Russia's war machines were at their weakest and most vulnerable. A harsh truth in the art of war is that even the most powerful war machines become as harmless as flightless birds when they are lying still on the ground to refuel. Ukraine understands this very well, and they never carry out major plans half-heartedly. The raid on Voronezh was a deadly symphony orchestrated by the coordinated efforts of three elite units: the 429th Independent Brigade, the birthplace of the renowned Archidist Unit, the 43rd Independent Artillery Brigade, and especially the Alpha Squad of the Ukrainian Security Agency, the shadows often behind the most legendary drone strikes. While the Alpha Squad directly controls the drones tearing through the sky, the roles of the other two units remain shrouded in darkness. The calculated silence of Commander Vopi is a sharp psychological tactic, making the Kremlin unable to know how the enemy infiltrated so they can't prepare for the next time. What really keeps President Putin up at night isn't the number of helicopters burned, nor the tens of millions of dollars that just went up in smoke. The greatest fear is the symbolic meaning of this strike. This wasn't luck for Ukraine. They are carrying out a campaign to eliminate the only weapon system that has protected Russia all this time, namely Russia's air defense shield. What happened in Voronezh is just the tip of the iceberg, proving that the campaign to weaken Russia's defense system has begun to yield devastating results. Russia, with its vast area of up to 17 million square kilometers, is facing a geographical problem with no solution. Even if Moscow puts all its efforts into building defense systems, they can never cover every corner of their vast territory, especially when a large part of their most modern systems have been withdrawn to protect the territories they control in Ukraine. Evidence of the cracks in Russia's steel shield has appeared repeatedly in recent days. On the first day of May, the world was shocked when a Ukrainian drone reached as far as Sargon Airport in Chelyabinsk, a location more than 1,700 kilometers from the front line. Here, two extremely modern Su-57K fighter jets and a Su-34 were heavily damaged, wiping out about $250 million from the Russian military in an instant. On the same day, another strike pierced the sky to reach a major oil refinery in Perm, which is 1,500 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. This is part of Kiev's strategy to cut off the lifeline, striking directly at the enemy's wallet to paralyze the war machine. The nightmare didn't stop there. By May 3rd, the governor of Leningrad region, Alexander Yordenko, had to admit to another attack targeting the Primorsk oil depot on the Baltic coast. Despite Russia's claims of shooting down 60 drones, Ukraine asserted that they had struck critical infrastructure, as well as a warship, a patrol boat, and a shadow tanker. Primorsk, along with Tuapse, have become repeated targets throughout April and May. The strange and also tragic thing for Russia is that even after being attacked 4 times in a month, their key oil and gas facilities still have not been reinforced with new defense systems. Ukraine seems to have established safe flight corridors deep inside Russian territory. These aerial corridors are never closed after each attack. On the contrary, they remain wide open for the Ukrainian military to exploit again and again. At hotspots like Primorsk or Tuapse, the Russians seem powerless to patch up these deadly gaps. What we are witnessing is a comprehensive weakening of Russia's defensive capabilities, creating an opportunity to hold the upper hand on the military chessboard. For many years, Russia has been confident in protecting its strategic assets thanks to Ukraine's lack of long-range weapons. But by 2025, the situation has completely changed. Airstrikes on Russia's energy infrastructure increased by more than 50% compared to the previous year, with over 140 attacks by the end of the year. The key to this success was the strategy of pulling out each tooth of Russia's air defense system. According to military reports, between June 2025 and March 2026, Ukraine carried out 492 direct strikes on Russia's air defense systems. The gaps that already existed have now become even wider and impossible to fill. This is not simply negligence, but rather an exhaustion of resources. Mr. Putin is now in a difficult situation, forced to choose to save one thing and accept losing another, while the noose of Ukrainian attacks tightens by the day. This number accounts for nearly 1/3 of all medium and long-range strikes that Ukraine has carried out so far. A systematic campaign to peel away Russia's air defense system is being carried out on a large scale, and Kyiv has no intention of stopping now that it has reached a turning point in the war. The nature of a turning point is that crucial moment right before everything changes forever, and Ukraine is now putting all its efforts into accelerating that change. At the beginning of May, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense released a shocking report. In April alone, 25 Russian radar and air defense systems were destroyed by medium-range strikes. On average, Moscow loses one system per day, and to fill those vast gaps, they are forced to withdraw steel shields from other fronts or from deep within their own territory if they want to protect the occupied regions. For the Kremlin, the real disaster is not just the loss of equipment, but the depletion of reserves. The commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian army, Mr. Oleksandr Cherkai, stated at the end of April that Russia is beginning to face a severe shortage of air defense missiles to intercept the waves of Voronezh. Weaker defenses are directly causing devastating consequences on the ground. It should be understood that Russia cannot produce new radar systems and air defense systems fast enough to make up for these tremendous losses. If they had that capability, Moscow would never have fallen into such a dilemma as it is now. However, all efforts to weaken Russia's air defenses will be meaningless if Ukraine does not know how to take advantage of the opportunity. But in reality, the opposite has been proven when Ukraine has thoroughly exploited those gaps with a relentless strategy of developing domestic weapons. One of the new trump cards that has appeared is the FP9 ballistic missile manufactured by Voronezh. This is a real monster. Its size is even larger than Russia's famous Iskander missile, and it is capable of reaching all the way to Moscow. Previously, Russian military circles believed that Ukraine would collapse before it could produce such a large-scale weapon. But the FP9 has appeared and is getting ready to destroy any target on Russian soil. A year of relentlessly hunting and destroying air defense systems was the preparation for Ukraine to set up those domino pieces. And now the FP9 missiles, along with the long-range drone squadrons, will be the decisive force to topple that entire line. Ukraine's resurgence lies not only in quality, but also in sheer quantity. According to international sources, at the end of April, Russia set a new record by launching 6,804 flying objects into Ukrainian territory, surpassing their own record from March. However, an ironic fact that the Russian Ministry of Defense inadvertently revealed is that even in those two record-breaking months, Russia still could not match the scale that Ukraine has achieved. In March alone, the Russian side admitted that Ukraine launched up to 7,347 drones into their territory, equivalent to an average of 237 attacks per day. Ukraine has truly surpassed Russia in one of the most crucial areas of modern warfare. When the enemy's anti-air defenses have been torn apart and scattered, Ukraine is ready to unleash massive swarms of drones, and soon they will be escorted by maneuvering warheads like the FP9. Notably, in April, the Russian Ministry of Defense suddenly became unusually silent about Ukraine's attacks. This is not surprising because they had already revealed too much unfavorable information in March and did not want to further admit that they are losing in this long-range game. But that silence cannot hide the truth that is being exposed to the whole world. From the burned-out helicopters in Voronezh, the blazing oil depots in Tuapse and Primorsk, to the advanced fighter jets torn apart at bases thousands of kilometers from the border. Russia simply no longer has the ability to protect its priceless assets. It seems that Russia is used to wars between people, using human lives to seize land just like in the world wars of the past. Putin still can't accept reality. The strategy of death by 1,000 cuts is being carried out by Ukraine in a cold and precise manner in real time. Every destroyed air defense system is a blow that gradually weakens Russia's power. Essentially, it's a classic air defense suppression tactic, But Ukraine has elevated it to a new level after years of quietly accumulating and manufacturing weapons under relentless bombardment. Now, Kyiv no longer has to ask anyone for permission and is no longer concerned about distance. Whatever Ukraine wants to strike, they will surely destroy. The balance of power has changed, and Russia's defense system will continue to melt away as Ukraine's drone swarms grow stronger, combined with the destructive power of their domestic ballistic missiles. Mr. Putin probably never anticipated this scenario, and now he can't find a way to stop it. In fact, Ukraine has just rubbed salt into another deep wound. One of Russia's most dangerous weapons, the glide bomb, is gradually becoming useless, turning into piles of scrap metal with no threat left on the Ukrainian battlefield. How disastrous do you think it would be for Russia to lose the ability to defend its strategic assets deep inside its territory? Does the appearance of Ukraine's FP-9 ballistic missile really mark the end of Russia's long-standing advantage in long-range weaponry? Because Ukraine is increasingly acquiring weapons that are more suitable and smarter than Russia's.